Titanfall 2 is a great game, is it not? It's recognised today as still one of the best single-player experiences EA has produced in recent years. So why is it deemed as unsuccessful? Why did Titanfall 2 ultimately fail?
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Well, to answer the question, we have to take a quick look back at where it all started. So, Titanfall 1, we'll call it. It was released in March of 2014 on the Xbox One and PC. The first multiplayer FPS created by Respawn Entertainment and published by everyone's favourite Electronic Arts, or EA. Titanfall did a fantastic job of introducing the world it had created to its audience. It brought with it an entirely new and fresh take on fluid movement and combat, really pushing the boundaries of how infantry players traverse the maps. Titanfall was one of the first to implement these ideas in a way that just simply worked, where players still felt in control whilst wall running and sliding. Not only was this impressive for its time, but it also inspired many other games to adopt this style of movement. And though many have tried to replicate the fidelity Titanfall pioneered, you can still to this day argue no one has done it better. Though Titanfall took plenty of liberties from other games in its genre, like the types of weapons used, the creator class system, it still brought plenty of fresh ideas to the table. As I just mentioned, the speed at which players moved, with double jumping and wall running and sliding. But the biggest, in all senses of the word, has to be the very thing the game is named after, the Titans.
Stand by for Titanfall. We're losing, but it's not over.
Welcome back, pilot.
Titanfall brought mech battles into the mainstream. I'll be the first to admit, coming from a more infantry/military focused multiplayer scene, I didn't see the appeal of two massive robots smashing each other to pieces on the battlefield. And now I'm saying that out loud, I realise how ridiculous that sounds, because that sounds awesome. My point being though, is that Titanfall is a game that made me and many other people realise not only was it super fun to be a part of, but it was also possible to mix that with infantry play as well. What it nailed was the balance. Even if it was 1 versus 1, pilot versus Titan, you always felt you had a chance. But the game wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. To stop this being all about the first Titanfall, let's keep this brief. Titanfall lacked content, simple as that. It didn't have a standalone campaign, instead it opted for a story baked in with its multiplayer, which gave you a little taste of the world Respawn created, but it never really satisfied as it only lasted between 2 and 3 hours, and it was kind of reliant on teammates to progress. It received a few maps here and there post-launch which helped somewhat, but ultimately it just didn't have the staying power to keep people's attention. With the likes of Destiny, Far Cry 4 and Call of Duty all releasing the same year, it was always going to be tough to retain players. On top of this, it was an Xbox exclusive, limiting its player base even further. When the player base fell, it fell hard, and soon most of its audience had left. Of course, the hardcore fans remained, but the mainstream had moved on. The mission was clear for Respawn and EA. The players are there, the concept works, Titanfall is and can be a huge success. They just had to go bigger and better to compete with their rivals in the most competitive genre of the gaming sphere. So Titanfall 2. Let's fast forward to October 2016. With the release of what was going to be the defining moment for the franchise, make or break time, the reviews came in. 8s, 9s, 10s across the board, with all respected journalists, websites and YouTube channels. As much as that, means anything. A great result for everyone involved. It looked ready to make a splash and set itself as a mainstay in EA's arsenal of games. It delivered on almost everything the first game did, with fluid and tactile gameplay that was somehow improved on what was considered near perfection. Graphics that caught the eye with a striking art style and a deeper look into the lore of the Titanfall universe. They managed to achieve this primarily with its biggest addition, one the fans had been clamouring for since the game's inception, a fully fledged single-player experience. Though lots of fans were excited about such an addition, many held it with cautious optimism, as they feared it could just be a short, tacked-on generic pastime they stuck on to tick a box left by the previous installment. But that optimism would soon pay off, and many fears would disappear the deeper into the campaign they played. The reviews for this game did not lie. The campaign is simply fantastic. To give you a brief overview, spoiler free, just in case this inspires you to pick up the game for the first time and play, you start off as Jack Cooper, a pilot in training, pilots being the guys who get to use the Titans, when suddenly the training is cut short in dramatic fashion. Stranded and left with no choice, you, the player, must learn how to pilot and develop a surprisingly touching bond with a Titan known as BT-7274. The voice acting and storytelling is superb, throw in some small dialogue options for player choice, Titan upgrades / unlockable classes, boss battles, amazing set pieces, and even interdimensional travel at one point. Yeah, seriously, it's in there. Tie all this with its already cemented yet further refined gameplay, and you have a recipe for one of the best games of the year. So yes, the single player was great, but did the multiplayer stack up? Surely this is where the game fell down, right? This is the reason the franchise fell into obscurity. Well, no, not really. It stuck with the same formula that worked very well for its predecessor. Think Call of Duty gunplay with Titans, but better than that, I guess, depending on how you look at Call of Duty. It's hard to describe because it has its own feel. It feels like, well, Titanfall. Firstly, it focused on a similar creator class system like Call of Duty, with a primary, a secondary, attachments and equipment. The balance of this system worked for Call of Duty for many years, and it also worked for Titanfall 2 here. If anything, more so. Every weapon felt like it had a solid purpose, use, pros and cons. Put that into an environment where you have to worry about giant titans being fair as well, and you start to realise how much work must have been put in to make sure everything felt just right. No matter what, you always felt you had a chance, similar to Titanfall 1. And of course, Titanfall 2's biggest draw was that of mech versus infantry gameplay. It brought the concept to its mainstream, doubled down on its quality, and added new quirks like more Titan and pilot abilities, bigger player counts, and AI teammates that were drastically improved and helped the maps feel more alive. By all accounts, it seemed like EA and Respawn achieved what they set out to do. Almost everything was bigger and more detailed, so what went wrong? Well, let's start with the more forgivable stuff, shall we? Yes, the multiplayer is largely fleshed out in most areas, but a massive part of the replayability of a multiplayer FPS is the maps. First off, a few of the maps were just not very fun, and that's okay. It happens in most games that you have a select few that just don't work. However, the game only launched with 9 maps in total, and in comparison, Titanfall 1 launched with 14, over 50% more content in that single area. And when a clutch of them are deemed bad, that can really impact the replayability of a game quite a bit. Titanfall 2 lacked anything meaningful to grind for. For many players, being rewarded for putting an excessive amount of hours into a game is something they look for. The sense of achievement and bragging rights goes a long way. In Call of Duty, for example, you have camos. In Battlefield, you have service stars for each class and weapon. Sure, it had unlockables, but nothing gripping or really substantial. On top of this, when they later added content through map packs, it all seemed a little dated and underwhelming to fans. At the same time, Titanfall's competitors had premium passes with new weapons, game modes, maps, and challenges to complete, and it kept people coming back on a regular basis. Titanfall just didn't quite do as much or enough to have the same level of pull, which has a hint of irony these days, as the live service model is becoming less popular with players, and some even yearn for the days where you simply buy an additional content pack and play it then and there instead of being drip-fed small amounts in a seasonally based system and battle pass. But despite all of this, there is one major contributor to the downfall of the franchise. One major decision that buried this game before it even had a chance. Let me put this into perspective. You're going to release an FPS into the gaming market. The one thing you want to avoid is direct competition with the biggest rival brands. You don't want to be sharing and splitting your audience with them. So you'd think, let's wait for a moment where people are feeling a little bit burnt out on the yearly installment of Call of Duty. And let's not release the same year as Battlefield, you know, the game that a lot of people have been waiting for and only releases every few years. That makes sense, right? Well, apparently no one thought about that. EA decided to release the game 1 week after Battlefield 1. Their own IP, their own title, the biggest FPS IP they own is Battlefield, and they released Titanfall a single week later. And not only that, it's October, so the very next month, the new Call of Duty is coming out. Let's look at this from a casual consumer's point of view then. Most casual gamers buy a handful of games a year if they're lucky. So based on statistics and popularity, the chances are Call of Duty is on the list. Battlefield is also huge and only comes out every 3 years or so, making it quite a big deal. And a major reason people play games is to play with friends. So give it 2 to 3 months when the dust is settled on all of these new releases, and people are going to follow their friends to the bigger titles and slowly leave Titanfall. Listen, Titanfall is a fantastic game and it didn't deserve this fate, but I was part of the problem too. I sank so many hours into this game, and yet I can't really remember them because ultimately I'm a Battlefield fan. So after a long day of work, weeks after both games have come out and the honeymoon period is over, which one am I going to go back and play? The majority of the time it was going to be Battlefield, and why? 2 main reasons. My friends were playing it, and to be honest, half of them didn't even own Titanfall 2. The sad truth is, Titanfall 2 was doomed from the day of its release. It was reviewed well and sold around 4 million copies, but compare that to the 14 million Battlefield sold and the 1.8 million copies Call of Duty sold within its first week. EA was never going to give this the support it needed. They kneecapped the franchise at launch, and that is why Titanfall ultimately failed. If you made it this far, I just want to say a massive thank you. What would you do for Titanfall 3? Would you make a direct sequel? Would you make a spin-off game similar to Apex? Would you incorporate Apex into it? Let me know. I'm really intrigued to see what you guys think of Titanfall and the future of the franchise, whether you feel like it's ever going to come back. I want to hear from you in the comments down below. If you haven't already subscribed, do so now so you don't miss more videos like this one. But that's it from me. Until next time, cheers.